Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ivomec Super.
Welcome to this week's podcast. Well, it's been a busy week across the country for farmers with poor weather conditions. And of course the Irish Farmers Journal Dairy Day in Punchestown. Many of you will have seen farmers take to social media in the last week lambasting our national broadcaster RTE for their series What Planet Are You On?, where their so-called diet expert Dr. Marco Springman recommended swapping local Irish cheese for avocados. Dr. Springman has been linked to the infamous Eat Lancet report, which resonated earlier in the year with farmers for all the wrong reasons. Well, our news correspondent Marcella Connolly was at Dairy Day and she spoke to farmers about what they thought of the perceived farmer bashing.
I don't think it has any grounds. Like, if you look at any of our NDC ads, 99% of what we produce is off grass and it's a green country. You know, we probably produce the best food in the world. You know, so this thing of running down farmers, I don't think it's on. I think you've got a lot of bodies that, you know, have different agendas. And I don't think farming is one of them. You know, farming in Ireland has never been done as well because we're working everything off grass. We're not trying to prove, and what we're selling is good product. Like, look at all the chefs in the world that are using our butter. Like, we're producing the very best of thing, but markets are slow, so we're just getting hard to get out there. But like, I do think we still produce the best food off grass, and like, if you think food coming from South Africa or South America into Europe to be sold, ours has no carbon footprint. It's here. It's the best. So why not use it? Milk prices, I think we have to produce something with value added. I think the liquid market is under pressure because people look on milk as white in a bottle, but we still produce the best milk off grass, and we're producing in a very sustainable way. And like, let's face it, if you take all a few big farmers out of it, most of those are family farms, ran one-man operation, looking after his family and producing good quality stuff. I think we can stand behind it 100%.
My impression is the farmers didn't do it themselves to help. I thought they killed themselves in the beef thing. I thought they made a big bags of that. I'd have definitely ran it differently myself. Being in business myself, no way would it be held that way. Very experienced, right? And I think they got bad publicity and could even get worse. From what I hear down the line is there's going to be a programme soon on television, they'll destroy it. You know that and I know that, right? And I think that's the real killer. They're going to have to work hard on publicity. They're going to have to put themselves out there showing what's really good and what's the plus factors. Don't let the bad be out there all the time. Because no matter what industry, it isn't always bad. It has a lot of pluses in the industry. You have to get away from the bad all the time. You'll probably have to get a bit more, I would publicise definitely more on the green and all that. Really get up, really show, maybe even livestock even proving the fact and getting the world known. That'd be my opinion. Milk prices kind of, I'd expect next year they're probably going to hold the same, maybe a slight rise because of the world markets as they are. They kind of work 9 months behind. They have been rising, so that should hold the price for next year unless they get very bad publicity of some type. They definitely, I would praise probably our Minister of Agriculture at the moment because he has got us well into the Chinese market. You have to get into markets. Obviously, they're going to lose probably a share in Britain, not as much as that is talked about by any means. I think that's a publicity stunt again by every business. For me, you'll get into the markets where you're not, where you have the heavy population, get a go on there and see what happens. And I go probably after more niche market because our country isn't big enough. Our world supply of milk is so small in the real thing. I go after niche market and prove it and get it out there.
Well, it's pretty poor form by the people that are at it. I'd expect that they should have known more. But I think it's unfortunate they don't understand the contribution that especially dairying is making to just the whole economy of Ireland. And I think really we probably, as farmers and as the IFA, we need to actually educate consumers even, I don't know if I can say it, RTE, the programme they did last week, it was totally biased against farming from what I saw. But I think it's an education process. Like, there are lots of things at the moment that aren't included, like grassland in the way in the carbon. If grassland was included and hedgerows, I think we wouldn't be that far off carbon neutral as dairy farmers, especially. So I think there is a big education thing there that needs to be done, and I think it's a challenge for dairy farmers and for all farmers, but I think we can take it on. Well, the milk price is at world price, basically, and I suppose if we're going to have carbon neutral food, it should be treated almost like organic food, that it should be at a premium that you're going to get carbon neutral food, so I think there can be good news stories going forward, and once the consumers understand that we are making an effort to be carbon neutral. I think that'll be, when everybody understands that, I think then we can charge more for food and get the retailers to understand that consumers would be happy to pay for carbon neutral food. But even organic food at the moment, looking at some of the retailers, it's almost the price of just the non-organic food, which I find is sad, because people spend a lot of money to go organic, and then after a few years the retailers seem to be able to cut the price just get footfall.
I think we have a serious problem with social media and all, and as farmers we don't engage with it enough to counteract the the way negative press. We're inclined to take a line down. I think our farm organisations are letting us down on that behalf as well. There's an awful lot of science out there to point in the direction that farming is going, and it's not being taken into consideration. Like, you talk to Andy Doyle or any of the lads about how much carbon is sequestered in soils. That's not taken into consideration. Our hedgerows are not taken into consideration, and the way we produce milk and beef in the country is not taken into consideration. Like, we've at Lambia chairman in the last week talking to a Dutch publication about that we never sold our product or forgot selling our product on our grass-based system. That beggars belief, to say the least. That's a huge concern for us farmers. We're 2 cents below where we should be, especially in Glanbia. We're definitely 2 cents below. We're the lowest milk price in Europe, and according to our chairman, they have no ambition to be any better. That's hugely concerning as a Glanbia supplier to me. Like, if our chairman has no ambition and our co-op has no ambition, I can't understand where we're going with this one.
Marcella Connolly with that report. Well, you'll have to forgive us this week if the podcast is a little dairy-centred. Dairy Day is akin to Christmas in the minds of some of my colleagues, including, of course, dairy editor Jack Kennedy, who wouldn't make a bad Father Christmas if we could dress him up for the Christmas party. There was an interest in a number of big toys for big boys on the day, including, of course, robots. Well, if you did happen to miss Dairy Day, luckily earlier in the week Stephen Robb went and visited some people, and one of them was Richard Swift, VP of Business Sales for NAIO Technologies, about their autonomous farm robot range.
Yeah, so NAIO is basically 7 years old. We're based in Toulouse in France, set up by two robotics engineers who are both very interested in farming. So two young guys, Aymeric and Gaetan, who started up the company with our first robot, which was Oz, which has become a little bit our trademark, really. So the Oz robot is our smallest robot and works for basically the market gardeners and the small vegetable growers. And that is our first certified robot that can work autonomously in the greenhouses and in the small horticultural crops. And then basically we've gone on from there to two bigger robots. So we've got the Dino robot, which is basically made for working more out in the field, and we're specialising on the lettuce crops. So we've got Dino robots working autonomously in mostly in France, Germany, and out in the USA and California. And then our third robot is Ted. Ted is our vineyard robot. TED is basically working in the vineyards, weeding, like Dino and Oz. They're all three are weeding robots. It's a bit less advanced in terms of safety equipment, so it can't detect people at this stage, so it's very much a prototype. But we've got big ambitions for TED in 2020, 2021 in the vineyard business. Yeah.
So you mentioned there about certification, and your Oz robot was the only certified robot you have for now. Explain to me what actually is certification, who does it, and why do you do it, and why do you need to do it?
Yeah. Obviously, it's a big concern within the robotics industry, as in the self-driving car industry. It's the same problem. Nobody wants an accident, so the robots have to be able to work safely in the field on their own. That's the ultimate aim, is that they work on their own without human beings having to be present next to them. So we have to be sure that they detect people. So we've got this organisation called the CMA, made up of all the major agricultural robotic companies, and we're working together to basically determine what the safety standards should be, so that a robot can work safely in the field. So it has to be able to basically detect people, detect animals. There's two safety features actually. One is to detect people or animals, and the other is to correctly detect the crop, so that it doesn't rip out the crop or do anything stupid.
So actually, just on that crop identification, how does the robot distinguish between the weeds and the robot? The weeds and the crop? Yeah,
basically there's with the Oz, it's detecting the crop with a camera, and that enables it to distinguish between the crop and the weeds. On the Dino, it's the same function basically. It's guided by, the robotic platform is guided by RTK GPS, and the actual cultivation tools that are doing the weeding are guided by camera to perfectly align them with the lettuce crop. And on TED, basically it's a bit simpler for TED, because vineyards are more, the vine is a fixed crop, so it doesn't move. It's planted and it'll stay there for 20, 30 or 40 years. So once you've done your GPS mapping, basically the robot just has to go up and down the field, and it's got like electro-hydraulic sensors to pick up to sense to detect the vine root, and then it just flips in and out of each vine plant, weeding as it goes along. Yeah. So that's GPS, RTK GPS guided to the TED robot.
Fantastic. So finally, Richard, I think it's widely accepted that robots are going to play an increasingly important part in agriculture. I suppose from your perspective, somebody in the industry and someone who sounds a bit quite further ahead than some others, where do you see it going? Do you see the need for humans to be almost cut out entirely from the food production chain, or is there still going to be a role for humans? Is it just going to be more tech end of things? Just where do you see the relationship between robotics and agriculture playing out in the future?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest drivers for agricultural robotics is the labour situation. Everybody we meet, all the growers, all the key accounts, they all say the same thing. Labour is a major headache, so they're having more and more difficulties finding people who want to either weed the fields manually or drive a tractor. So once the robot's fully autonomous and up and running, we're expecting it to also do a lot of data collection. So people are then going to be able to use it to actually manage their crop as a complete answer to crop management. It'll be able to do the weeding and collect data and give them lots of information. In terms of people actually managing the robots, the way I see it going is, and this is one of the things we're trying to work on now in terms of coming back to this safety issue, is that it may be possible that in the future people will be able to manage robots from a distance. So you can imagine somebody behind their PC, and they can actually, there's perhaps a camera on the robot, and they can see what's happening live, and then that person could potentially manage perhaps 4, 5, 6 or even 10 robots in a field just from his office, sat behind a PC, basically sat behind a computer.
Okay, interesting stuff. Richard, thanks very much for talking to us.
Stephen also found out about robotic weeding. He spoke to Ben Scott Robinson, co-founder of the Small Robot Company, about their autonomous farm robot range.
So Small Robot Company is an agri-tech startup, and we are building robots to replace tractors and completely revolutionise arable farming by using a system called Farming as a Service and 3 robots called Tom, Dick and Harry.
Okay, so just give us a sense of the robots. Are these tractor-sized robots, or are they smaller? Are they swarms, drones? What are they?
So our robots are significantly smaller than tractors. They are around 300 to 400 kilos rather than a few tons, and they allow us to not disturb the soil and not compact the soil while carrying out important jobs. So Tom is a monitoring robot and is around 200 kilos and is the size of a large travel briefcase, I suppose. Originally it was a little orange thing that you'd see noodling around the field and collect 0.1 of a hectare's worth of data a day. Since then we have built a new one that we call Super Tom, which is a bit bigger, with a big boom on it, which means that we can gather 20 hectares worth of data a day. Since the last time we spoke, the Wilma has gone from being a basic AI through to being a complete operating system, complete with a new front end, with a web front end that you can use, like a web tool like you would do Google Maps or something like that, and allows you to see the data that's being collected and fed through the AI, so you can see the location of each individual plant and the weeds in the fields.
Yeah. So just for our listeners, so the Tom robot is collecting the data, sends the data through to the Wilma. Wilma processes it and then puts it out to the other robots.
That's right. So the data will go out to Dick and Harry. So Dick is a crop monitoring robot, which allows us to treat each plant individually and kill weeds using non-chemical means. And Harry is a planting robot, which plants without disturbing the soil with minimum draft force.
Excellent. I suppose in terms of development of your business, since we were talking to you last, you now have a Tom robot out commercially working on farms.
That's right. So we have 20 farm partners who have paid for the privilege of us testing stuff on them, which is very lovely. And we are now delivering a service of mapping their crop and mapping their weeds to 300 hectares of that.
Okay. How come you decided to go down the leasing business model, providing the service, as opposed to selling the robots as some other robotic companies are doing?
Because we realise that farmers can't afford to replace wholesale their technology by buying new stuff, and because we also know that we have to go through a learning process with the robots we're building. So we thought that it would be much better if we absorbed the cost of that evolution and development, so there was no risk on the farmer's side of buying early kit which might break down or not be as fast or reliable as later stuff is. So we thought we would charge a per hectare basis rather than selling the robots. It also means we can provide a full service, so we put Tom on the fields and it has a kennel and looks after 200 hectares at a time, and then we just take Dick and Harry out to the farms as and when necessary. So it's much better utilisation from our side and much more efficient and effective from the farmer's side.
Can you give us an idea of the cost for the service as it stands and maybe where it's going to go in the future?
Sure. So the service that we're providing right now is £15 a hectare, which allows us to map the crop plants and broadleaf weeds. We are working on a grassy weeds detection in our AI, which we're looking to roll out by the end of this growing season, which will increase that to about £40 a hectare. Because obviously, if you know where your black grass is, there's a big benefit to that. Then over the course of the next year and a half, we're looking to finalise and productionise our weed killing system on Dick, and then we'll be providing that as a service for around about £150 a hectare.
Excellent. Finally, Ben, I suppose we are at the Future Farm Expo, and we're kind of discussing all things technology and where the future of the farm business is going. From the small robot company's point of view, can you paint us a vision of where you see farming in the future?
So I can paint a vision around arable farming. I think the really exciting thing for arable farmers is that I think by reducing the amount of chemicals that's going to be used and using our service, and I'm sure there'll be other services that are similar, arable farming will start to make a profit again, simply by reducing the amount of inputs and reducing the damage to the soil, so the soil will be much better for a growing medium. In terms of being able to get people involved and more excited around farming, we think that by sort of removing removing the drudgy jobs of diesel vehicle maintenance and stuff like that, and allowing people to focus on maybe introducing new and exciting models into their farm, growing new crops, diversification. That sort of stuff will encourage more people into farms to do interesting stuff. And also, if you have a look at some of the other companies around here that are doing amazing things around vertical farming and clever stuff around veg and fruit and this sort of stuff, there's some really exciting opportunities, I think, to make farming more efficient, more effective and better for the environment.
Fantastic, Ben. Look, great to chat to you, and we'll talk to you this time next year again.
Brilliant. I do hope so. Thank you very much.
Stephen Robb there. Well, also of interest to dairy farmers will be continued Chinese interest in Irish milk. The new Bays plant will be the first privately owned Chinese facility to use Irish product to export product out of Ireland to Hong Kong, China. And of course, we heard all about it.
I'm here with Thomas Reen, Head of Quality Assurance for New Bays Ireland, who are going to trade as Ire Liffey at the official opening of their infant formula facility here in Carrickmacross. Thomas, a big day for the company.
Oh yes, it's a fantastic day, and today is the summary of 3 to 4 years hard work coming together, and today is the opening of the plant to celebrate that.
What's the timeline in terms of maybe product moving out of this plant to China?
So we've completed our engineering studies for the equipment. The next phase then is to do a shelf life study where we will make product, put it under shelf life testing and send it to the China authorities for approval, and then we hope to be manufacturing for China in the middle of next year. Prior to that, we hope to supply Hong Kong, and we hope that process will start maybe January, February.
Okay, so I mean it's moving quite rapidly, as you say, and I mean the standards that I suppose a facility like this has to maintain in terms of the quality of product must be exceptionally high, because you have to match all the other facilities in Ireland and the Irish regulations.
Yes, so I mean this site here represents an investment of $20 million from qualities at the foundation of this building. Initially we have to meet the Irish standards, which is one of the best standards in Europe. So our goal is to prove our capabilities to the Department of Agriculture, and then we will be audited by the Chinese authorities to prove our ability to meet their standards as well. So really we're trying to be a global company, so we'll have to comply with many standards. The excellent part is that the standards are combined together into one global standard, so once we meet that, we should be able to satisfy many markets.
What you're attempting to do here in terms of creating or establishing a new brand called Ire Liffey, I mean, it is a significant investment to be able to compete with some of the more established companies like Abbott, like Wyatt, that are already producing product here in Ireland.
Yes, we're in that zone of competitiveness. Our capabilities is focusing on the dry blending and the canning. So we won't be competing in terms of the liquid drying. So our specialities will come into play once we receive the base powder. So what we can do is we can take that base powder and we can formulate it to the unique formulation that we like or that our third-party customer wants.
I mean, in terms of the people that would be working at this facility, it's a mix of Chinese and Irish people, I presume?
Yeah, so at the moment, I suppose there are more Chinese here because of the startup, As we get into more commercial production, we will be hiring more people from Ireland, but we'll also have that overlap with some colleagues from China. So this will be a partnership approach with our sister company in Shanghai.
In terms of the volume of products you hope to produce, I mean, this facility that we're here today to officially open, what potentially can it produce, or what's the kind of the scale of the operation?
So with one shift, this plant has the ability to produce 7,000 metric tons. We have the ability to pack in 2 different can sizes, which typically from a customer point of view is a 400 gram and an 800 gram. So, but that's not taking into account the ability to introduce second and third shift. Also, this site is about 8,600 square meters for the facility, but the site itself is about 29,000 square meters. So huge ability to expand in the future.
In terms of, I suppose, the future in terms of trying to establish yourself, differentiate yourself in the market? I mean, what is the plan on that, or is it good enough to be Irish source product selling on the shelves in China, if you know what I mean? Or are you trying to differentiate yourself among the other powders that are on the shelf in China?
Product from Europe is seen as a premium product in China, so we have that advantage. We also have the advantage of having our R&D facility within our group, so we can customize the product based on the demands of the customer. So we have that ability to be flexible, and coming from what is seen as a very clean environment with a very safe supply of milk, and that gives us quite an advantage in the market.
I suppose that's where the journal come in terms of the farmer side of it. I mean, this product is going to be sourced in Ireland from Irish companies 100%. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, we plan to purchase as much of the ingredients as we can in Ireland. As you know, there is quite an array of international suppliers, Irish-based. So where we cannot find a material based in Ireland, then we will look outside of Ireland. But we will try and base our sourcing within Europe, again to comply with that image of this is a European-based product, but also the biggest advantage we have is that the milk we use is Irish-based, grass-fed, and that gives us a very positive image in the market.
Thomas, best of luck with the facility.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
A continuing issue for the dairy world is labour. Odile Evans spoke to Gary O'Keefe, Managing Director of Kiewit, about life on the coal face of recruitment in the dairy industry.
Well, I suppose being in international recruitment, you can recruit people from anywhere, but there's no point in recruiting people that don't match the skills. So we investigated a lot of countries, and when we went to Kosovo, we found people with small farms, a little bit of dairying, a little bit of arable, so generally mixed farms. But more importantly, they had a decent level of English and a culture that was very similar to ours in terms of their understanding of rural life and family values and that kind of stuff. So we went down there to look and see how suitable these guys were for Irish farms, dairy farms and other farms as well. And what we found was amazing. The matches were very good.
So you have brought guys over through the new work permits that, hit the headlines as being part of the solution to the dairy crisis. But you've brought them into meat factories as well, so ABP and Care. You've guys down on farms in Cork. You've guys on horticulture farms in Laois as well. How many people have you brought in, and how many are you expecting to bring in?
So at the moment we have about 60 people on the ground, and we know that we have people in application process ready to come, and that's numbering close to 200 at the minute.
And how long does the application process take, and what are the big barriers that you'd like to see removed?
Yeah, well, there's no point in saying that anything else except that the process is very arduous. There's two steps to it. The first step is the work permit itself, which I know the department have put a good bit of work into extra staff, and that can take anything from 12 to 16 weeks for a work permit. That's step one. The next step then is you need to get a visa. So the work permit physically gets sent to the office in our office in Kosovo with all of the employment contracts and all the documentation, and then we need to apply for a visa for Ireland through the Department of Foreign Affairs. Now, our Department of Justice, that takes a little bit of time, so it's very complicated. Kosovo is a new country. We have to send the application to a consulate in Belgrade, who then send it to the Irish Embassy in Budapest and reverse the journey. And it seems incredible, but to get just the visa can take anything between 8 and 12 weeks even at the moment.
So like from a time a farmer says to you, I need a labourer, it could take up to 5-6 months?
Yeah, definitely. There's situations where we got it done in 4 months, but generally we're talking about anything from 4 to, in extreme cases, 6 months. So it does require a bit of planning.
So you're kind of a specialist in this whole area. You've helped bring people in on visas from Poland before Poland, they've joined the EU and everything. You've good experience in this area. Give us a helicopter perspective of the labour crisis in Europe at the moment.
So if you think back to 2001 and all those years, even from 1999, I was involved in recruiting people from Eastern Europe, which was generally the saviour of labour in Ireland, because people were in emerging economies there. Now, all that situation has completely changed. All those, what you might call feeder countries, have now developed economically. Their unemployment levels have dropped, and they're now facing net immigration themselves. So they're no longer a source of labour for the EU, and they in fact need labour beyond that. So what you'd find is, for international labour, you're having to go further afield, maybe more eastern, depending on the level of salary and depending on the level of skill. So it's more and more difficult to get a match of skills for dairying. Kosovo is one of the, I would say, pots of gold in terms of skill. But for wider afield, we've gone as far as Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan. We've been down in South America, in Bolivia, and other countries who are further back on this economic curve.
So you think, 10 years ago we were looking at Poland, currently you're looking at the likes of Kosovo and the Balkan states. In 10 years' time, where will we be recruiting staff from?
Definitely you'll be talking about Central Asia and South America, without any doubt.
Okay, and you're talking about skills and all the rest of it. Is language ever a barrier, do you think?
Some people make language more of a barrier than it is. In fact, psychologists will tell you that only 7% of communication is based around words, and 80% of it is body language. But what we're trying to do is make the transition easier. So as soon as, for example, in Kosovo, as soon as we have people selected who will have some level of English, they automatically go into a 12-week, 120-hour language training program, which helps everybody integrate. And it's not just for the farmer to understand them, it's to aid the guys coming over so that it's less stressful. Remember, moving home, moving country, leaving your family is very stressful. So the least amount of barriers that you have there is better. So it's certainly around training. Training is everything.
And you like to see people as well, when they come here, getting integrated into society and not just being on the farm, like that they get the chance to see the country, play a bit of GA, whatever it is as well, to make them feel at home.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it sounds mad that people will come from Kosovo to Cork and wind up playing GA in Ballincollig or whatever, but it's not beyond the bounds of possibility. They're young fellas who are athletic, and remember, just because you've moved home doesn't mean that life stops for you. You still have the same social needs, and you still have the same need to be around people, and you have downtime. You don't work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So getting people to understand, and our training for people in Kosovo involves as much awareness training as anything. Introduce them to what's the norms in Ireland and what's their options and what they should be doing for themselves to keep a balance. It's all about balance.
Stay tuned, because we'll be back straight after this.
With beef prices on the rise, this week's Irish Farmers Journal reveals how the new Beef Price Index will deliver greater price transparency for farmers. Find out where and when you can vote in the upcoming IFA election. Plant-based foods have a higher carbon footprint than meat, according to a leading clinical physician. Radical changes to fertiliser use on the way. Plus, don't miss our Agri-Toys special with Christmas gift ideas for the little ones in your life. Only inside this week's Irish Farmers Journal. You cannot afford to miss it.
The Ulster Farmers Union held its first ever Women in Agriculture conference last week. Current Deputy President Victor Chestnut, who is set to take over as leader of the organisation in 2020, told our Northern editor David Wright that he wants greater gender diversity within the organisation's committee structure and believes a future female leader will soon emerge.
Victor, I suppose the reason I've often been asked to speak to you, maybe more than anybody else, is you're going to be the next president in 2020 for the next 2-year term, and this is on your watch going forward. You've had a conference, discussed a lot of issues. Is there a need for change in your own organisation around how much women are involved in committees and in structures going forward? Do you think there's need for change?
Undoubtedly there is in some areas of our business. Now, in our headquarters we have a good gender balance. In our group staff we have a good gender balance. And in our Rural Affairs Committee we have a good gender balance. The rest of the committee, unfortunately, are the diversity in those committees is not good enough. And I think it would benefit from that diversity being improved.
And you mean then the likes of your farm and your beef and sheep, your dairy, those livestock committees that are really the core of a lot of your work, Very much male dominated still.
Yeah. Yes, very much so. We have the old lady, yes, they're appreciated, but I think we need more of them. Now, I'll go back to the Next Generation forum that we set up, and the majority of those young people are now on committees on their own right, and that's what we would like to see happening with our ladies in agriculture. And
how does that change? How do you encourage people to get out there and get onto committees? What has to happen on the ground?
Two approaches. One, the ladies have to start attending our group meetings, and that has to be a friendly environment for them to go. So I would like to see sort of a list of these people being followed up that attended today, to ask if they would be willing to get more involved in the union, get them to their local group meetings, and then hopefully they will be elected on their own group meetings onto the commodity committees by right. I don't want to set a policy in place where so many have to be on. I think that would be the wrong approach to take. But look, diversity, business has shown that diversity in boardrooms is to the advantage of a business. We need to not shy away from this, but embrace it and encourage it. This was the first nudge in a big wheel. Hopefully the wheel will start moving and gather momentum.
And obviously we have seen the NFU have their first female leader. I know the IFA are doing a bit of work around this as well. We've had 4 agricultural ministers in Northern Ireland have been females. In my lifetime they've all been females. But your own leadership team still male dominated. How long do you see that being before it maybe changes?
I think there will be a female president. I think there will be a female president in that room in the next number of years. Now, I think again it's about merit, and the proper person has to get through and being elected on merit. I would be so wrong to say that we need a female president within 5 years or 10 years, but it will come, and it will come more with diversity in our committees and coming up through the committee structures. But yes, we need to get to a position where gender is not an issue as to which gender becomes in the leadership team.
And is there anything you can do as hopefully the next president that would make that whole job a bit easier for people who are key on farms, who are husband-wife teams, and maybe a wife leading on the farm, to actually get involved? Anything you could do to encourage those people to come forward?
Well, I think this is the first thing that we're doing to encourage ladies and empower them and make them feel valued. And we need to then carry that culture down to our group meetings and get more of them there. We had 2 ladies at our local group meeting, but that was no use in a group of 40. You know what I mean? That's wrong. So we need to encourage that, promote it. I don't think it will happen just on its own. That's why we had the conference today. I think it was long overdue. I think the atmosphere on there, I think you would agree, was good from the start, because people were realising this is something that probably was too long in happening. So it's the first move in what should be one of many. We'll go back to rural affairs. Our rural affairs will discuss what other options they could do to encourage the diversity in our committees.
David Wright there with that report. Well, I'm now joined in studio by our market specialist, Phelim O'Neill. Phelim, you've written an awful lot for the paper this week, but you've also written the front page. So tell listeners what is on the front page this week.
Well, I suppose the big news this week from the point of view of the beef industry is the fact that the long-awaited indices that were promised as part of the talks in September are now revealed. Board B have produced 5 different indices, and we have explained them in some detail in this week's Irish Farmers Journal.
There's an awful lot of anger being directed at Board B by farmers. I remember Barry Cassidy was at Hustings last night, and apparently a farmer said that what Board B were doing was unconstitutional. So there's a lot of misunderstanding there. I mean, is this going to get Board B back into farmers' good books?
Well, look, the reality is, I suppose, that there's Board B is a big part of our industry. It's involved in the quality assurance programme. It's involved in a whole number of areas of promotion. And certainly I know at farmer meetings they very often come into the line of fire. But I think on this occasion, when we look at what's been produced here, is something that we've never had before in the Irish beef industry. It brings a new level of information to farmers. It doesn't necessarily put any money in their pocket, but it gives them an indication of where the markets are and where the market values are. And say Board B have done the legwork on this. They've been commissioned by the Minister as part of those negotiations back in September to go and do this. They have done that, they've delivered it, and we have published an explanation of it this week in the paper. So I think on this occasion, farmers will welcome the work that Board B has done.
Talking about money in the pocket, I mean, Is there any light on the horizon on beef prices?
Well, following up, I suppose, on what we would have went with last week in the Farmers Journal, we would have shone a light, I suppose, on some of the prices that are available in other major beef exporting countries around the world. And if Ireland's in the top 6 or 7 global beef exporters, we find that only Brazil and Argentina are actually below us when it comes to comparing farm gate prices. So in terms of the global market trade for beef, it is exceptionally strong at the minute, driven very much by the Chinese demand, which all, of course, not only the issues with the African swine fever, which has left them with a serious scarcity of pork, but they would also, their year-on-year beef imports had been increasing anyway, so that's a very buoyant market at the minute. And just this week then, and following on from last week, I've noted Brazil prices have actually jumped by 30 cents a kilo. Now, they had been coming from a very low base in the mid 240, 250s or thereabouts, but they've jumped up in this case to their highest price. Their highest price province this week is coming in at just under €3 a kilo, but 2.94 a kilo in that province. So that surge in Brazilian prices, I think, would give us some hope in Ireland that we would begin to see a price rise fairly soon. And indeed, we're beginning to pick up that vibe actually as we go to print.
I know lamb prices have been particularly strong recently, and I heard a comment this week that if it hadn't been for the summer shenanigans, that perhaps that's where our beef prices would be as well, relatively strong this time of year, if we didn't have the backlog of cattle that we had to kill. Would you have agreed with that?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose farmers didn't make the decision to protest lightly, and of course we understand the plight that many found themselves in that forced them out through the factory gates. But I think the reality of life is that anything that disrupts our export trade, and again, the CSO published figures this week that showed how much our exports to China and to the US and to other major markets had dropped during September. And when we're not making those sales, there's a backlog of beef building up, a backlog of cattle on the farms, and that certainly hasn't helped the trade anything over recent weeks.
Okay, well, Phelim, thank you very much for that. It'll be interesting reading, I think. That's it from the podcast this week. Thank you very much for tuning in. Remember, if you want to get in touch, you can email podcast@farmersjournal.ie. I'm Hannah Quinn-Mulligan, and the sound engineer this week is Ferdia Moon.
Brought to you by Ivomec Super.